too often in these conversations, people think they that are attracted to conscious capitalism, they're more conscious than capitalist. And that's actually a huge problem. Because if you don't have a profitable business, if you don't have goals to grow, it's not going to be successful. And it's really tough to build a profitable, scalable business. If you're going to be investing in a company, you want to know that they actually have plans to grow, that they've got the intelligence, the wherewithal, and the attention to detail with the finances to do that. Because unfortunately, a lot of people are really bad at finances. Like personal finance is this terrible issue. Financial literacy is a terrible problem, not just in the United States, but around the world. And so, and it's really tough to get that right. It's very easy for people to talk a big game, like you said, to just say they have this grand purpose without actually following through on it. So anyone can put a purpose on a slide, but you also need that slide showing your numbers and your plans to grow and your ability to grow in fulfilling that purpose. And that is actually a lot more difficult to do. So I think so what I'm saying is, it should not be one or the other. The answer is both. And it's really tough to do both at the same time.
Welcome to Hiring Nowadays, a podcast about what makes and breaks successful hiring.
All right, everybody, welcome to today's podcast. I'm super excited to have Alexander McCobin on today's chat. We're going to be discussing conscious capitalism and the importance it has to your business as you start it up, or if you're existing, or for any type of organization that you may have. I truly believe in conscious capitalism, and when I was introduced to Alexander, it was I don't think we both knew we were in this space, and it was kind of serendipitous and enjoyable to learn and to chat about it. And when I really heard his motivations and his thought process, I wanted to capture that. And I feel a lot of our listeners will really like to hear that as well. So that's why I was really excited to have him join today as part of this this conversation that we're going to be having. So Alexander, why don't you give like a bird's eye level of what you think, why you think conscious capitalism is relevant even today?
Well, first off, Calvin, thank you for having me. It's really been a pleasure to get to know you this year since we only connected earlier this year. Yeah. You're right. When we first talked, we didn't realize we're both in the conscious capitalism sphere, but that provides a connective tissue for us that's been fantastic for building our relationship and understanding who we are as people and business people in order to be able to work together and help each other out. 100%. Because, I have a philosophical background, nearly became a philosophy professor. At least I went to grad school in philosophy. And so I always take it back to those first principles. And conscious capitalism really does the same thing. It takes the concept of capitalism in business back to the philosophical foundations. So let's go back to the 18th century and go to the father of free market capitalism, Adam Smith. Most people know him for his book, The Wealth of Nations, which articulated the principles of capitalism most effectively and most articulately back in 1776. But over a decade before he wrote The Wealth of Nations, before he was an economist, he was a moral philosopher. And he wrote a book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, that laid out basically the ethical foundations on which capitalism and business is able to thrive, which is based in the nature that people can strive to be fundamentally good and create value for one another and reciprocate morality with each other, which leads to the concept that we actually all do better in the world. We prosper when we're able to freely engage in trade and production and provide services and goods to one another that makes each other better. That's the premise of capitalism, the voluntary exchange of goods and services, and that by allowing for that moral foundation, we are able to create more value for each other and everyone does better. Conscious capitalism doesn't necessarily reinterpret this or articulate a different view of capitalism business. It builds on that. It's the idea that the business does best when it's creating good in the world and has several principles articulated for how we go about doing that. The first is to have a higher purpose than just maximizing profit. Not that profit's bad. Profit's great. We want to maximize that, but not as an end in itself. We do that in service of a higher good that we're trying to achieve, which is the purpose for a business's existence. The second principle is stakeholder orientation. It's not that, it's about getting past a zero-sum mindset that the only way to benefit one stakeholder group, say shareholders, is to take away from employees, but rather to understand all their interests are interconnected. So you actually benefit stakeholders when you benefit employees, when you benefit customers, and do so by coming up with creative ways to align all of their interests, which is possible and is a better strategy for a business. Third, with conscious leadership, really living out the values of a business in the leaders, setting the example for everyone else, so that we're able to then get to the fourth principle of conscious cultures, where everyone in the organization is able to bring their full selves to work and is aligned on fulfilling that purpose, modeling what leaders do, providing an example for leaders to follow as well, in order to create value for all stakeholders. So that's a high-level overview of what conscious capitalism is and how it works. But at the end of the day, it's you actually can run a better business and actually will run a more successful business if you lean into these conscious capitalist principles.
And yeah, I remember when I started out my journey with this most recent venture, I was actually part of an accelerator program called the Conscious Venture Lab. And they focus, I think I was hit hard really about focusing on the purpose of what we do and why we do it, right? And to this day, that sticks to me, because I don't know if necessarily selling my purpose, but getting people to understand the purpose of why so for us, it's why we believe that LATAM talent has the power to unlock a company's potential. So when someone asks me, what do I do? That's what I say. Now, I just happen to be a recruiter that works in that world, but I could be anything in that. And at the end of the day, that's where I believe my goals go towards. And I think that was a crucial component part of it for this conscious capitalism, as well as when I bring people onto the company, that is really important for me when they're coming on. Like, do they believe this? Granted, albeit most of the people I bring on, well, I think everybody I have brought on is in LATAM, but it's really important that that is understood, because if that vision, that purpose isn't flowing through them, I don't want people to work more than they have to, but I do want them, when they do want to work, that energy is focused in a way that a positive outcome can occur. Yeah.
100%. And that's the power of having a purpose. It's a unifying feature that draws people together, that provides a guide for making decisions, and perhaps counterintuitively actually allows you to maximize profits, because you're not just thinking, how do you make the next buck the next quarter? You're thinking about, how do you fulfill this purpose that other people are attracted to, and allows you to think longer term, that draws profits to the business itself as well.
Yeah, because I think so part of doing all this, none of it is to not increase profits.
We love profits.
When you're doing this, the profits come because when you think of, okay, I need to do this for this stakeholder, you don't do something that won't generate some form of profit in a sense. You're just not focused solely on the profit, correct?
That's right. You're not just making decisions to maximize the profit right now in the short term with this one customer. You're thinking about what's going to create long-term value, and that profit comes when you do that. And the value is really defined by your purpose. Profits will follow. And
on the term, I think that maybe the second most famous economist, Milton Friedman, right? Maybe the second, arguably, would have stated that the company's sole purpose is to increase profit. So you have the moral philosophy, and then you have profits. And we're talking about profits and purpose, but when you're in your position at the institute, like, how would you? Because this whole time you've talked, profits are important, but when you come to someone that's like, profits are only important, what do you say to that?
So it's interesting. John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods and co-author of the book Conscious Capitalism, actually had a debate with Milton Friedman in the 2000s on this very issue. And by the end of the debate, Milton Friedman was saying he pretty much agreed with John. He said that it was merely a difference of language in what they were talking about, which I think was Friedman recognizing that the best way to maximize profit is to have a higher purpose, except the order really does matter. Knowing that there is a higher purpose to a business is what is the end, the telos of why it exists, and profit is a means. It is critical to actually maximizing profit and fulfilling the purpose. And if you set the sole goal of a business to maximize profits, that actually has the counterintuitive effect often of undermining profits, including in the short term, because it doesn't provide a guide for what the business should actually do. And it sets up conflicts between what the business does in fulfilling that profit and needing to constrain the attempt to maximize profit in certain ways, instead of saying we have a purpose and that aligns the different activities in the way that we make profit towards that positive end. Mm-hmm. So business leaders who say they just want to maximize profit, I tend to say, okay, that's different from what we're doing. And I tend to think they're not actually going to be most successful over the long run. If they don't have that higher purpose driving them, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to operate. And I don't have as much trust in them.
And to that extent, higher purpose has to be true too. You can't just say the higher purpose. I think that's a really big thing, because I had a discussion with Jeff Cherry in our last podcast about really kind of like faking these ESGs for PR perspectives and actually really believing in it. I think it also, in our industry, right, it really helps with who you get to a company. So if you're a startup, because generally I try to work with startups and understand them. I know a lot of the times we talk about what is your purpose? Why are you doing this? Focus on your why. But a lot of the time when you talk to investors and trying to raise, that kind of like in the early days, it gets there. But I remember this one slide that I was always told, how do you get to $100 million? Right? It's like, okay, what's your MRR? What's your AR? How many users are you going to get? This is where you're going to get, okay, and it's like fulfill that level of incentive, FOMO, greed, whatever you want to call it. But it's like that slide is what helps drive the investment. I know that has to go with the purpose, but why do we get so attracted to something like that as opposed to, okay, I'm a founder, this is my purpose, follow that more? Or do you think it's just a misinterpretation?
No, I think you're right, but here's why. Because we need both of those. Too often in these conversations, people think they that are attracted to conscious capitalism, they're more conscious than capitalist. And that's actually a huge problem. Because if you don't have a profitable business, if you don't have goals to grow, it's not going to be successful. And it's really tough to build a profitable, scalable business. If you're going to be investing in a company, you want to know that they actually have plans to grow, that they've got the intelligence, the wherewithal, and the attention to detail with the finances to do that. Because unfortunately, a lot of people are really bad at finances. Like personal finance is this terrible issue. Financial literacy is a terrible problem, not just in the United States, but around the world. And so, and it's really tough to get that right. It's very easy for people to talk a big game, like you said, to just say they have this grand purpose without actually following through on it. So anyone can put a purpose on a slide, but you also need that slide showing your numbers and your plans to grow and your ability to grow in fulfilling that purpose. And that is actually a lot more difficult to do. So I think so what I'm saying is it should not be one or the other. The answer is both. And it's really tough to do both at the same time.
And to that extent, it's like really having that passion driven behind both. Because if you're just really good at the passion, you won't, or you really good at that purpose, maybe the startup isn't the right path. Maybe you should be more of a motivational speaker, or I don't know. And then if you're really good at the numbers, maybe this, like whatever you're building it's more strict, it's more small business or just a strict way of living, and you're not going to weather really those tough times. Because I know And I would like to hear a story from you about this too. But when we went through some rough times, uh, I really had to talk to the people in my company about what we were going through. I said, this is what I have to do. It sucks, but this is the moves I have to make as the CEO. We're going to have to get through this. And to my surprise, actually not really my surprise, I felt that I know my team well enough, but to the extent that I was really grateful that they felt this, they all backed the company. They didn't say screw you. They actually backed the company and supported it. And so that as we get to a more prosperous time, we're all going to benefit.
And that's the amazing thing. When you have that higher purpose and you build a team around that and these principles, they understand that there are tough times sometimes, and they find ways to pull together and work with each other. We have countless examples of that from amazing conscious capitalist companies. And yeah, I've seen that in my experience as a leader as well. I mean, I was running Conscious Capitalism, the organization, when COVID hit. And we were primarily an events-based organization up to that point. We had to cancel our annual conference that was scheduled for April 2020 when everything got shut down in February, March 2020. We were thrown into chaos. Team didn't know what to do. The community didn't know what to do. But you know what? It wasn't a question of how do we maximize profits and all this. It was, okay, how are we serving the community? How are we serving our purpose? And that rallied everyone to come together, and we were able to reinvent ourselves and the way that we were able to fulfill our higher purpose, pivoting the business model in incredible ways. And we did that because we understood our purpose was to serve our business leaders, to help them be better conscious capitalists and come up with a different way of doing that in those weird, challenging times.
So what did you do when that happened? So it sounds like you did some form of community outreach, or what was your process to iterate on the in-person events? Like maybe the simple thing would have been online events, but just because you're an events company doesn't mean you necessarily have to do online events, right? So I'm curious, like when that happened, how did you iterate on your events-based organization?
So we did exactly that to begin with. We can't do our in-person conference. When we get a virtual conference, easy thing for us to at least start with, right? But we didn't want to just do virtual conferences going forward. We need something more than that. So we started to experiment. We didn't just go out and survey our community to find out what they wanted, because they don't always know what they want. You've got to figure it out for them, how you're serving customers, especially if you're innovating. And so we started testing different ideas out. But we didn't start charging for that. We offered it for free. We included the community in what we were doing to give us feedback, to help us put this together. And by the end of 2020, we had developed a new membership program where we were providing new kinds of services to help connect conscious capitalists with each other, to level up their skills, to build their businesses in new ways, that they were asking us to start charging them and encouraging us to expand this to other people, because we had given so much to them. We were focused on giving first, to helping other people out. And the revenue came afterwards, and it created a very powerful system to grow conscious capitals in the organization with after that.
I love that, like that. I think I've been to enough. I remember being in New York, and I'd go to these events. I'm getting to it, and it was all about you give first and you ask later. I feel like it's one of those things that you say, but how do you like? I remember a lot of times like I would try, the give would be kind of a give wrapped up in a pitch, right? Like, oh hey, let me like I'll give a terrible example. Like, oh hey, let me give you a one-on-one interview prep session, but like we are recruiters, right? And so that essentially gets them to use our service in a sense. Yeah, we might be giving something away, but how do you genuinely give something that has nothing to do with your company? Or should the give always be kind of related, not necessarily pitchy? It should be honest, but would you like, how would you wrap that give where nothing really has to do with a sale? Or does it always should have some type of pitch to it?
So I think it should always be about creating value.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's about creating value. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to sell someone on your services or to buy your goods if you believe it's actually valuable and will help them out. That's what you should be doing. And so there's nothing wrong with that to begin with. There's also nothing wrong with them saying it's not for them or saying no. And I think some people get this wrong where they think if someone says no, they failed in some way. Well, maybe you haven't clearly communicated the value of what you're doing. Maybe you did offend them or you did something wrong, but also just might not have been the right fit right now. And that happens. So I don't think it's wrong. It all depends on the mindset that you go into it with. It's not that offering a free trial, offering something as a teaser to allow you to build a relationship in order to show what more value you can create if they were to become a client or if they were to buy something is wrong whatsoever. So long as you go in legitimately trying to create value for them in the first place, where that consultation legitimately is trying to help them out, and you're doing that to help them, and say at the end, and here are all these more things that we can do to help you if you became a client. It just costs money because it's going to require a lot more of us in order to provide this to you. Or you use that initial call, that initial meeting, to find out what they're interested in. And that's part of the qualification process in sales. You want to figure out if this is a good fit. You don't want to sell ice to Eskimos, as so many salespeople have said in the past. You want to find out if they are living in Alaska and don't need ice, or if they're living in the South in the summertime and really do want ice in their lemonade, and that would really help them. That's the qualification process.
That's so true. And as it kind of, I think it gets difficult when companies are so short-sighted, right? Because I think I've trapped in this in the past, because you have these monetary goals that you have to try to achieve. And I think maybe that's where, when you get trapped in, okay, I have to drive profits. Okay, I have to make $10,000. I have to make $100,000 this month in MRR. And you focus on that one thing rather than, okay, how much value am I going to add? And you change the thing where the money becomes maybe a key result, but not the objective, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's the difficult part for, like, as startups, because we have, like, a big thing is we create a go-to-market strategy. We have to be like, okay, we have to get this many users, and none of that is wrong, but I always remember, because on the sales team, we always have to come up with our, like, how much money are we going to generate for the company for the quarter or the month? But it's not so much the money generated, it's like, we have to do that. That will come. It's more like that will come as long as we are generating value in some way. And if we can't generate the value, then we have to iterate on that idea. Right?
So there are different types of metrics that you can establish. One way of differentiating metrics that I really like is between leading versus lagging indicators. What are the metrics you're setting that, if you're hitting over and over, indicate that you're going to get the key results that you want? And what are the metrics that you set that really are the result of hitting the things that matter for you? That's the difference between leading and lagging indicators, respectively. Profit is a lagging indicator. It's not a lead that you're doing the right things. It's an indication that you've been doing the right things. And it's really important for business leaders and businesses in general to set the right metrics, to set the right leading indicators that will generate returns, that will generate the results that they want. Focused on creating value first, knowing that profits come as a result of creating that value and controlling costs to make sure that you're not spending more than you're bringing in.
And how would you say startups, because I know, like, we have the KPIs and everything, and it's usually metrics, right? It's all, like, numbers driven. But, like, you're right, there's the cost per acquisition, customer lifetime value. What's another different type of metric when, especially because, like, let's take a look at, like, more of the stakeholders and the morality of it as well. Like, what metrics do you think aren't being talked enough about when a company is growing or trying to grow.
So those are all absolutely right, but let's talk about sales, because it's really easy to just say you want your salespeople to bring in X amount of dollars or X amount of clients each month. Well, you have to ask yourself, what are the things that need to be done in order to accomplish that? How many phone calls need to be made? How many in-person meetings do you need to have? How many emails do you need to send out? How many times do you need to talk with a prospect in order to close them? And those are all leading indicators, so that you're able to more effectively track, okay, is the team reaching out to the right number of people? And are you getting the right number of conversions into phone calls, into second calls? And is that leading to closes? And if you're not hitting the numbers you expected, why is that? What do you need to change in terms of your approach or what you're offering or anything else? But it's about getting to those stepping stones to the ultimate result, rather than just saying the goal is the profit at the end of the quarter, and go do it without any guidance for what to do.
Yeah. I think that's really important when you're looking at how to lead the direction of those sales operations, rather than, because if you're looking at profits, like I want to achieve this profit, but like that doesn't give you the story behind, okay, profit X means you have to do all these things first in order to hit that profit. And we shouldn't be focusing on that profit, because if maybe I need to give a blog article, maybe I need to give a video, maybe they need to do this to this one prospect before they even consider replying back to me, right?
Exactly. And it's going to be different for each company, and in the sales process for each prospect potentially, or hopefully you've got a standardized system, but you will need to tailor it. But it's about getting into those specific actions. And the great thing is those actions are also going to be determined by your purpose, by the kind of value you're creating. And so the way that you explain it to them, and you're going to have to experiment, figure out what it is that you do in order to get to that ultimate goal in order to make that profit. But that comes from understanding your purpose and what you're supposed to be doing. What are the actions that are driving you that you believe are creating value in the world, and engaging with your stakeholders to make sure that you are creating that value for them.
And thank you for bringing it back to the purpose, because I was just about to ask and get into that purpose for companies. That a lot of the times when we start a company, we start with a problem and we get passionate about this problem. But the next step, really, maybe not the next step, but one of the early steps, is diving into that purpose. How do you effectively communicate that purpose so that let's just start with the beginning one, is where you get people that want to join your organization? Because a lot of the times when you talk to a solo founder or solopreneur, they're like, I need to find a co-founder. And I have a lot of feedback to entrepreneurs when they do that. But part of it, I would imagine, has to do with purpose and getting them to get them to follow them in that regard. So how would you, when someone's like, I need to get a co-founder, how do you think getting that purpose right will help them find that co-founder?
Well, I do think it's really helpful to have co-founders, or at least for them to be thinking about how to build out the team, other people who are truly deeply committed to the purpose of the company and what you're doing. And it's kind of even baked in there. You asked, where does purpose play into that? Well, it's almost tough for me to answer that question, because I think that drives everything else. When you're starting a business, you don't have a track record of what you've done. You're not making a lot of money. You're putting money into the business and you're taking a lot of risk. And the question is, why? If you don't have some higher purpose behind what you're doing, if you're just in it to make a quick buck, it's going to be really easy to give up on the business. It's going to be really easy for a potential co-founder to look at that and say, well, I could go and work for peanuts over here, or for nothing, or put money into a business, or I could go make a really nice salary at a big company somewhere else, or somewhere more established. Which one is going to make more money, especially in the short term? Pretty obvious. The reason people take risks, the reason people join new ventures, is the concept of the purpose of what you're able to build and the change you're able to create. And sure, there's a hope that there is a monetary reward for that as you go through it. But if that's the motivation, it's not going to last very long. It always takes longer. It's always more challenging than people expect it to be in business to get those monetary rewards. And if you don't have that purpose driving you, you're probably not going to stick with it very long.
I think that's really key, right? I think there actually is like a time limit for this purpose too on the early days for the co-founder, because I've talked, at least for when it comes to a CTO, because that's when people come to us, they're like, or talk to me, they go, I want to find a CTO, a co-founder. I go, well, if you don't have a plan to pay them at a low end $150,000 a year, you're going to be really difficult, because like you said, I mean, as one of you said, they can find a job making $250,000 to $300,000, not a problem in this day and age for someone at CTO level that's really a CTO and good. They'll join you though, like they'll take a pay cut. But you have to have that plan to follow that purpose. That purpose can't just be hopes and wishes forever. And there is a time decay or a time limit on that, like hopes and dreams. Maybe it's a 2-month window or something, or you don't even think about that co-founder full time till you actually have that plan to bring them on board, because money, I mean, depending on a person's financial situation, they will, that you can't survive off of hopes and dreams.
But that's absolutely right. And on top of that, if a business isn't bringing money in, if it's not getting customers or clients, it's not creating value.
Yeah.
If that purpose just remains a nice statement on the wall or in your slide deck until you start getting customers that you're actually serving and creating that value for. And so if you're not getting those customers, you're not living out that purpose. You're not building it up. And that gets back to my point before about why that slide of how you're going to get to 100 million ARR and what the financial map is really actually matters to fulfilling your purpose. It's really tough, but you've got to have that in order to do good things in the world.
That's true. That's so true. And even when, so you're starting off with the CTO, getting them, and then how do you how does this purpose, how does this roadmap really drive the rest of the team, and even to create in that final step, that conscious culture? Like, how do you recommend when you're talking to companies as they're building their teams up? Like, because I don't know a single person that I've worked with that goes, oh, I just want people to work until they die, right? They're always like, I want to do right by them. But how do you change that from doing right by them to actually putting something within the capabilities of what you can do, to the purpose, to everything? Like, how do you really, like, what is your thought process there?
So it starts with recruitment. I think recruitment is foundational to all of this, because you have to remember, it's not just about the company's purpose. It's about the purpose of every individual there. And you need to find team members who have individual purposes that are aligned with the businesses. I'll say this about myself. I don't ever plan to stop working. I think it would be really boring in life not to be working. But that's also because I've always had a purpose behind what I'm doing. And I think it's fundamental for everyone to have that purpose. And that gives you motivation. So it doesn't feel like work. It's just something you want to do. And when you are recruiting to add people to your team, you want to find those who have purposes that are similar, that are going to be aligned with it. So they just actively want to do this. It's not just a paycheck for them. And in so doing, you then want to have training programs and efforts to align not only their activities, but their values and the way those values are carried out. And one of the things I see a lot of companies misunderstand about values is that these aren't just providing a guide for what to do. Even more importantly, they're guides for what not to do. When you say, here are our values, you not only need to say, here are examples of what those values look like in action. Here are examples of what are of the red lines when people go beyond our values that we don't tolerate, and really hold the line on those, because that determines the culture that you have.
I love that. And I like to talk, like, when you talk about values, I see this. So I don't know if I was a LinkedIn or a Twitter or what, or an Instagram post or something recently that I saw. It goes, our company values are honesty. I think I'll just say honesty. I don't remember the other two. The honesty one stands out to me because it's what company doesn't want you to be honest. It's like one of those, yes, of course, but like, how do you look at values in the sense of the company? Because it's not honesty that you want, it's a certain aspect of honesty. It's kind of like when someone says, oh, you're we need good communication. What does that really mean? So what is that step that when you're going through the value system that they really need to think about or
It
starting
depends.
to think about?
It depends on how they're going to be used. It gets back to what I was saying, that it especially requires establishing the red lines and examples of what this means. I mean, for some companies, maybe radical honesty, radical transparency is a value, you know. All right, we're back.
Sorry.
I mean, you take a company like Bridgewater Associates, started by Ray Dalio. Their radical honesty is just absolutely incredible. And it is one of their values, where if there's even a whiff that someone has misinterpreted what they've done in the past or misrepresented what they've done, they dig into it and they hold people accountable for it. Are there penalizations for violating the values? And are you making clear what it looks like to violate that value and what the penalty is? Are there explicit rewards for doing great with those values that people know they're being evaluated on and that they'll be rewarded for? That's what it really comes down to for every company. And if you're going to say, here are our values, here's what we want people to do, here's what we don't want people to do, you better have ways to enforce that and either reward or remove people for living them out or not living them out in order to maintain your culture.
That's really, I really like that a lot, because our number one value is we believe in LATAM, right? We believe in LATAM talent. Like that is, if anybody comes to our company and doesn't have that singular thing, we can't work with you, because that drives everything we do. We ran an education program to teach English, to teach remote work when the pandemic just started, because in LATAM, remote work was actually seen as like the only people that did remote work, it's kind of in jest, but the only people that did remote work were the multi-level marketing people. So it wasn't seen as necessarily, and not to say that's not hard work, but it's not seen as like a real job where you go into an office. And so we had to understand that and take a step back and see that, okay, if no one knows that, I mean, if this remote work is new, we have to educate on that. And we only do that through that belief. And everybody in the company has to understand, we all understood that. So we work towards that. Now, if that measure didn't live up to it, up to anybody, we would, I mean, we never had to worry about it, but that was like the first measure we always have to go with anybody. And even companies, obviously the companies come to us because whether they explicitly know that LATAM is like this, or they're just kind of like, oh, we want to take advantage of arbitrage. But in the end, I always see them. I think we do that good job of helping companies understand that LATAM has that power.
And I love that. That's absolutely critical. And reinforcing that with the team over and over again and helping them live out those values and including bright lines if people are deviating from that is really important to maintaining that culture that you have at Awana.
Yeah. And what I mean, and when you work with companies, how do you establish those break lines? I think that's one thing that's harder for me to do, is establish those break lines, because I know it's not a negative thing, because it is, you have to have these cutoffs. It's part of a company, but how do you help, like, how do you like look at break lines, and especially how do you look at those break lines and establishing them?
Well, it is really tough to, in my mind, not come up with the break lines. It's typically pretty easy to establish them ahead of time. If you think about it and just say, What do we not want people to do? What does not express one of our values? You can probably come up with a list. Write those down, make it clear to everyone in the organization what those are, and even do trainings to help people understand that. Use it in the interview process. Use it in evaluations. The tough part comes with enforcing it, because especially as conscious capitalists, we want to give people second chances. We want to do what we can to help them out. And it's about finding the right delicate balance of being supportive of them, helping them try to do better, but also saying, here's when you violated one of our break lines, and we can't have that. And so here's what we're going to do to fix this, to keep this from happening again. And sometimes that means additional training, sometimes it's additional support, sometimes it just doesn't work out with team members. Conscious capitalism does not mean you never fire people. It means you help and be supportive of them as much as possible in a transition if they're not the right fit for the team.
Yeah, and I think that was early on for me. It was really hard to establish that memo pattern. That's what we do. We have a memo that goes out to think, okay, this happened. How do we see you improving? This is what we can do if you need to have more like, what can we do to additionally help to overcome this so this doesn't happen again? I think that took actually a while for me to come around, because usually it was just like, oh, I didn't really address it at the beginning. That was my fault as a CEO. And I think that can be a trap for companies without establishing. And I say that break lines because you say, yeah, it's really easy because you do that. I know for me that enforcement was really difficult in the beginning, and it took me like almost 1.5 years or 2 years to really establish that and come up with a good system.
That's right. It takes time too. It's not easy, and it also requires refinement. We get better at this with time, but it's about being committed to those values, to that purpose, and what's going to help you fulfill that purpose, and working with the team constantly to enforce that in order to fulfill the purpose and to develop and maintain and continually refine the culture that you want.
Yeah. Well, this has been excellent, Alexander. We're going to do some fun. I wanted to ask a last few questions. They'll be a little bit more fun, lighthearted, just so people can get to know you a little bit better. So, where's your favorite place to go rest and relax and read a book?
The old family farm back in Pennsylvania.
Okay. And what's the hardest thing for you to get up every day and do?
Ooh. I tend to do things based on what's my purpose, and I really enjoy doing them. Let's say not eating too much is probably the hardest thing. I love food.
And the last book you read?
I just finished
Capitalism.
No, I read that a long time ago, although I do reread it every so often. No, I just finished Grant Cardone's Essential Closes or something like that. Fantastic book on sales techniques.
Awesome. And how can people get a hold of you?
Just reach out to me directly, alexander@libertyventures.vc, or look for me on my website, mccobin.com. Happy to talk with anyone about conscious capitalism or growing their businesses. My purpose is to build the ecosystem of values-aligned business leaders who are committed to making the world freer and more prosperous, and help them scale their businesses to scale their impact in the world. So if that aligns with anyone listening or watching this who wants to reach out and talk, please do so.
I will say Alexander's a really easy person to reach out to and have a conversation with, and he's a genuine person. So I'm really thankful for having this conversation. And for anybody, when he said it's that easy, it is that easy to get in touch with him. So thanks for everything. I hope everybody here enjoyed what you had to offer, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too, Calvin. You're an amazing leader as well. Love this podcast, and super, super glad that we got to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in and spending a part of your day with us. We appreciate it. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Have questions? Head over to awana.io and ask away.